Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. You are visiting with Ragnar's Architecture and Garden Travel. We're going to be discussing a little bit of the history of gardens and where you find paradise. Paradise is first mentioned in literature in the Bible in the book of Genesis, where we find Adam and Eve installed in paradise with no worries whatsoever. When the hunters became gatherers, they planted vegetables, herbs, and fruit trees so that they could subsist without hunting meat. That is not what we're dealing with here. We are talking solely about pleasure gardens and the history of pleasure gardens. When we look back in history, we see that Eden sets the paradigm of the perfect, beautiful garden. Assyria has mentions of gardens. We have no other, we have descriptions, but we obviously have no photos. These are historic pleasure gardens. Babylon, who hasn't heard of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon? Neither do we have any photographic or art uh, evidence of those gardens at the time they were existing. Egypt has some paintings in the hieroglyphics of some pleasure gardens, but graphically they really aren't very good. Greece also had some mention of gardens, but we don't have any record of those either. So historically, which gardens do we find that may still exist? We have the Oriental Gardens, and the first gardens I'm showing you before we get to the Oriental were just pictures of my house. This is a tree found in the public garden at Qingdao. They have a lot of cherry trees. They have a lot of flowering trees that are, frankly, what we might think of as our own, but a lot of the most beautiful trees and shrubs in the world do come from China, such as rhododendrons, azaleas, camellias, hydrangeas, etc. So you have a lot of beautiful stuff coming from China. You find a lot of water and pagodas in the gardens of China, and they work around the water. They have a lot of natural rock formations that they utilize. They figure that who can do better than nature, so if they can incorporate what's already there into their work, they will do so. You also have a lot of moon doors. For some reason, they had a lot of circular doors that they wanted to walk through. They have the same type of architecture in their bridges. They also are the ones who originated bonsai, even though that's now a Japanese term and it's more associated with Japanese gardens. Most of the garden work in Japan was originally copied from China. So these bonsai trees are in China in a garden in Suzhou, Jiangsu province, west of Shanghai. And some of these trees are over 100 years old. And they consider this an art, and it takes a lot of time and effort to do this. Um, a lot of the pagodas were places to sit so that you weren't in the sun while you're enjoying the gardens. They have a lot of waterfalls and water movement, which would give you sound. And having some of the water also would provide air conditioning in the summer. This is in Yantai in Shandong province in China. And here again, you've got pagodas in the middle of a huge lake, and they have the trees surrounding it. Now we'll go to some of the Islamic gardens. And there were Persian gardens before Islam was created that had some of the same features that a lot of the Islamic gardens had, such as water. Most of the Islamic countries, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Oman, are in very sere or hot and dry places, and water is truly at a premium. So the water would do several things. First of all, it gave you visually, it was very attractive. It gave you the sounds of water, reminding you that you did have water. It was a sign of wealth, and most of the plantings were of the green variety. You did not have much color. But when you had the water there, it showed that you were a wealthy person, and it also had some religious significance. Very little of the Islamic work gardens had a lot of color. This is the Alhambra in Granada, Spain, and some of the best existing gardens of this type are found in southern Spain, where the Muslims had conquered much of Spain up till the 15th century when they were cast out of Spain. But you have a lot of beautiful gardens remaining. This garden happens to be in India, has some of the same things, except you've got some of the flowering trees, water, shrubs, very few flowers. But comes from the Islamic portion of India. Now we're looking at this is a much more modern garden in Spain. And what else we have existing historic gardens are the Hadrian's Villa in Tivoli outside of Rome. It's mainly ruins, but you can see the layout. You can see the pools. They had a huge villa, which is no longer existing. And you had the fountains. Now I'll show you, while I'm talking about some of the conditions you need for your gardens, I'll show you some work that was done by me in California. What you need for a good garden, if you have to consider the types of soil, whether it's acidic or lacks acid, you've got to see whether it's loamy or whether it's sandy, whether it drains or whether it gathers to become marshy. You also have to consider the amount of sun that you have. So you need water, sun, and soil. The USDA publishes zones 1 through 12 and showing you what can grow in each area. As you see in California, you can grow most anything. It is one of the true areas of paradise where you can grow gardens of almost any type you want. Here you're seeing where the water is coming off the natural rock formation into a stream, into the hot tub, into the tiled pool. Now we'll go back to modern gardens, and it started with a Renaissance in Italy. And one of the features of Renaissance gardens and most Italian gardens of the early period, this is the Renaissance started in the mid 1400s in Florence. And what you'll find is you find very little color. Later on, after and this is in Verona, prior was the Villa Lante in Rome, you don't see any color. Italian gardens were considered green gardens. You'll see a lot of hedges. You'll see a lot of trees that are familiar. You also found a lot of fountains. This is a fountain at the Villa d'Este in Tivoli, and it was very interesting. They diverted a river to come over to this garden so that the pressure of the river would be put into pipes, which were then narrowed, which created great pressure, and they were able to put up jets of water in their fountains without any pumps. It's all natural. And if you've never had a chance to go see this villa, it will really excite you. It'll blow your mind. We will be doing a feature on Italian gardens, several features on different areas of Italian gardens. This is the Villa Balbianello, where they had two films that I know, well, many more than that, but the two best known are the James Bond film, where James Bond was recuperating in the sanitarium. You also had the wedding of Star Wars here at the Villa Balbianello on Lake Como. And you see the pollarded trees and the shrubbery coming down to the water. Next, we go to France. Now, France came into the Renaissance after Italy, and they were pretty much copying Italy. In fact, they hired a lot of architects from Italy. They hired a lot of garden designers from Italy. As you can see in the background, you have an immense pond. They actually floated boats and had brought Venetian gondolas and had all kinds of funky games on the lake down at the bottom. There are certain areas where you can have this type of these types of gardens with a lot of water because it has natural rainfall. This is in Burgundy, France. A villa. This villa here is the Villa Ile-de-France. It was donated to the city of Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat on the Côte d'Azur in southern France, and it's the Villa Ile-de-France donated by Beatrice Rothschild. and it has more. It has a lot of features that are for a hotter climate. It doesn't have as much. The water had to be brought in because you don't have a lot of natural rain down here. Then we go to England, where you had a lot of rain. They don't need sprinklers for their gardens. And by the time England came into its best period of gardening, it was in the 1700s. And by this time, they had imported a lot of the flowering shrubs and trees from China, such as the rhododendrons, azaleas, camellias, hydrangeas, and they became known for a lot of wild color and great fall colors. They also had a lot of bordered parterres, and it was very nice. And finally, we come to America. We've already seen most of the Spanish gardens, um, and we come to America. This is Philo Lee in Northern California, in the city of Woodside, and they copied primarily English, but in California you copy just about everything. This is the cactus garden, which is the world's largest cactus garden, has the most varieties of cacti anywhere in the world. This is the Huntington Gardens in San Marino, California. And even if you're not a big fan of succulents, there are some marvelous, marvelous plants here that you would consider. However, if you live in an area where you have a freezing winter, you can't plant it because they will freeze. This is a Zen garden. It has a gate. It's walled off, and they do their patterns in the gravel. And it's a place to contemplate without interruption. Thank you for coming. And what we're going to do is later we're going to have a video on landscape architecture, which I think you will find fascinating. It adds things like fountains, patios, walkways, statues, etc., to your garden. You can even do it in a smaller garden if you've got at least half an acre. So thank you for coming, and please look forward to the next one. Thank you.